I don't know if you've ever looked at a map. Uh, Focop is way at the south end of Madagascar,
Hmm.
and it was part of his station that he worked at. And when he was going to go out there, he would take out whoever was in the mood to do things like that. He'd take us out in the car with him, and he would go and talk to the people, and he'd let us run on the shore there and look for these shells from the Apiornis.
Hmm.
And because there was this one area where the Spanish must have killed a lot of the Apiornis, or they used them to get the native people to come and trade off what they had. And they wanted these Apiornis eggs to take back to, they mostly, Spanish people that would pick them up there. And I can't remember who hit the other one, because I kind of, I know Elisabeth got some of my stuff. They had an auction before they came back to this country, out in Siumbe. They had an auction of some of the things at the house that they weren't going to pack up and take back. And I know she came to, I had a mandolin, and she got that. And I wonder if she didn't get the piano too.
Oh my, that would have been nice.
Yeah, she did the things that she wanted.
So what did you do with Elizabeth and some of the other native girls? Did you just go run and play games, or
Yeah, well, we used to.
were there games that you played, hide and seek or other things, or
No, they would just come up some days and just play. Or you would take, purse and pretend we would go shopping.
oh yes.
And different things. Very simple.
Now I can't remember hearing Grandpa preach. Did he? Were you able to understand him when he preached in Malagasy? And
Oh, yes.
yes, you could understand.
You mean, could I understand the English?
Right, right.
I do the language as well as he did, practically. That I learned the language
Mm-hmm.
so that I
What, did you kids study it, or did you just learn it by being with the natives?
just learned it from being with them.
Huh.
Oh, and the one thing that my kids, I told them about was that there was a man on our ship from Madagascar to France, and there was a man there that bought some bolt of some silk material, and the guys that worked on the ships were not supposed to bring stuff in because the cities and countries wanted them to be paid tax on them coming in, and a lot of them would come and try and talk these missionary people to take in things that they were not supposed to. And I remember Dad took in a bolt of silk for one man, and we had the worst time getting it. We got it into France okay, but to get it delivered, it was in Marseille, and he told us an address, and Dad had no idea what it was going to be like to find a place in Marseille. And I remember we finally walked one day trying to find this place, and we finally found it and got it back to him, and a few days later he saw us at another place, and he was so thankful that Dad had brought it in, and which is unusual for Dad to do something that was really against the law.
Yeah, right.
But this man convinced him that he could make use of the material, and so.
And Grandpa, you talked about his car that he was able to buy, huh?
Yeah, well, he had this Chevrolet, and it was one that had the windows that you could take out, and but he'd usually have them in, and so they didn't get to be so dusty inside. But he would sit and work on the motor. I can remember seeing him coming down to the barn, to the garage where he sit on the floor working on things in the engine, and he would be working away, and he says, I'm not a mechanic, but he would be working to try and clean up things and make them run again so that he could keep that car going.
And then he would give rides to many different people.
Oh, yes, and the natives, when they wanted to go, and if he was going someplace to do something, he evidently would keep in mind who wanted to go, and he'd call them, and he'd take them, tell them to come and ride in the car with him to these places where he wanted to. So Dad having to try and line up passage for us to go here and there and try and arrange it somehow or other so we'd stop in Norway. And there were some people that, some of our friends who would say, oh, your parents have so much money, and because we'd stop in Norway and do things like that. And so I asked Dad about it, and he said, it isn't that. He says, I just save at different places. He says, I don't spend as much for the ships that we go on. He says, I'll take a cheaper passage and just save a few dollars here and there so that we can go off in Norway and see the families around there. We got to see so much that other kids didn't. When we were in France, my dad would make sure that we went around and saw the different things in France. Mom wouldn't always go along, but Dad would get up and take us around to see the different things that he felt like we should see. I remember when we were in New York, he got us up early one morning and took us down to where the newspapers were coming out, and he says, you should remember this. He says, that's the way the newspapers are set up. At early in the morning they come down, and the newsboys come down and pick them up. And he got us up out of bed and took us down to see what the newspapers coming out from the big buildings there.
My mother used to talk about the ship rides home and how interesting those were, and playing with other kids and stuff. Do you remember any of your ship rides home from Madagascar, or the ones from the United States back to Madagascar?
Oh, those are the most interesting things. I guess it's one of the things I'm most thankful for is those month that we spent on was it really a month?
It was, yeah, 6 weeks maybe. Tell me why. Why was that so interesting for you?
We stopped at all these different cities up Africa, and go on shore. Dad would take us in to see different things. He was a great one to go in and pick up little things that he thought Mom would like. And he'd say, oh, you kids can come along. And we get to go into these different stores and just see what they did at different places. And he was real good about letting us go. I think Mom didn't feel that good a lot of times. And so he'd take us along and kind of keep track of us while he would kind of search around to find things. I know he had some amber beads that he got one place because Mom wanted some, and he got some ivory beads for her that she liked, and he would spend time picking up things that she thought she would like in these different towns. So that I think we got a big education just with what Dad used to do, taking us to different things, which a lot of kids missed, that the parents didn't do things like that with them.
And then on ship, you did things together too, and
Yeah, he, he would get ready. Oh, and the one thing, thinking back, I can always remember doing things with Dad. And he used to, when we go swimming, he'd go swimming with us, which, a lot of the missionary men didn't think of going down, go swimming with their kids. And he would go down and go swimming with us and give us rides on his back. He'd swim on out, and we could hold on to his shoulders, and he'd swim on out into the waterways where it was deeper. And we just got to hold on and go out there. And I remembered, for him to do something that playful, to go swimming, but he knew that we all enjoyed the trip out as far as he could go. Or what, but he did a lot of things. I remember when we were at Seal Bay, which got to be out to the station, he decided that we need to go picnicking. And we kids would go with him picnicking. Mom wouldn't go. He would take us out and just have a simple lunch out there, but we went out to see the monkeys and in the trees where they...
you mean the lemurs?
Yeah. And there were places that he knew of where he'd take them out and sit in the afternoon like that and watch them playing in the trees above us. And so there are different things that you remember that he did that I don't think other fathers did. Maybe they did. I didn't. I knew he did them.
Tell me about Grandma and her cooking. Did she was a very good cook. I remember my mother talking about her cooking.
She was very good cooking. She used to make, mangoes, which you call mangoes. My mother used to buy bushel baskets of them when the season was there in March, and
now you're talking about Madagascar, right?
yeah, I'm talking about, because that's what I remember most. And she'd take these and cook up and make jam because she couldn't stand to see them not being used. But she'd tell us to go ahead and eat all we wanted. And so she made fish balls, fish. Yeah, I imagine it was fish balls, and I used to thought they were great. But she'd buy the fish, and then she'd cut it off, the meat off, and have the cook sit and mash that until it was fine enough for her to make meatballs, Norwegian style. And they were very good. And she taught them how to make meatballs too, but the others were fish balls. And she taught the cooks how to do all of these things. And when we left and came back here, everybody wanted the cooks that she'd had because they were so good. They had been taught by her. and they liked the other missionaries there knew that she had trained those cooks to be excellent cooks. So they'd pick them up as fast as they could.
And did Grandpa ever do any cooking?
Uh, Grandpa hated cooking. When Mom was sick towards the end there, and he'd go out and pick all these berries that he had outside and then make jam and things with it. And he didn't like to do it, but he did it. But she'd buy, or he'd buy meat, and she'd buy a steak or something, and she'd take it and put it in water and boil it. And he just thought somebody should help her cook. She did not know how to cook.
And Grandma made all your clothes, didn't she?
She made all our clothes, and she actually was a pretty good at picking out clothes that were pretty. I remember she went shopping one day and got to this store and found this a piece of a red, I don't know if it's silk, and it was just a big square piece. And she brought it home and she said she was going to make me a dress, and I thought, oh, you can't do that with that piece. But she whipped it together. She had just a short dress underneath, and then she had this big square collar on it. And I thought it was the neatest dress. And but she just made it, and I remember she got it ready for Christmas, and I had this bright red silk dress for Christmas.
So you said that Grandma was very particular about her dress and how she looked, and
She liked to look really neat.
And where did she do her shopping? Where did she like to do her shopping in Northfield?
When we were in Northfield, she liked to do her shopping down at Perman's. And I know Mrs. Perman was probably very good to her because she had been a missionary, and she would go out of her way to help Mom when she'd come down. And I think she kind of held clothes for her because Mom had these clothes that certain sizes that she liked, and she told her any time that they came in, call her, and then she could just come down and look at them and find clothes that she liked to wear. And I remember she bought a blue dress that was must have had sequins on it because it was kind of bright and shiny, and she'd wear that when she would dress up for things. And I remember she had it hanging in one of the trunks when we went back to Madagascar, and I used to think it was so neat to go and try it on, and I thought it was so pretty. And I can't remember that she ever wore it out there, but she brought it back with her. And
So,
well, I don't remember it that much, but I remember they told me that I cried because I had to go back to school, and yet I liked going to school with my sisters and brothers, and so I can't imagine that I spent that much time crying about it, but maybe I did. I like being out in the country. I like going out with they had this school right close by, and I had all these young kids that were about my age. When I first started, it was Dorothy Lovis, And as it went on, Agnes Ackland and Helen Trigstead climbing the trees. I loved, but I do remember the girls. I think they had dolls to play with, and I never was a doll person, so I probably was more interested in climbing trees.
What do you remember about Betty?
I remember her as my babysitter. I mean, she took care of me all the time. I always went with her, and I think she felt like I was her responsibility. So I don't know if it was showed. I do know that, after we were older now, when she was out in Washington, she called me all the time. And she called when she was dying. The boys were saying that she insisted she had to call me when she was just very sick.
Do you remember what she said?
She would just call and find out what I was doing, and I don't remember a lot of that she did. I think it was just to find out how I was, and she talked to me for a while. Borgie read, and she read, and she read.
So she was the reader, huh?
She was a reader. She loved it, and she would read to me too. And I remember when I went down to Albuquerque and stayed with them. She was still reading and reading, and I thought, I don't see how she could see that much. But she was a big reader and a good reader, and she remembered a lot of it. She must have. I mean, she was a good student.
Oh, yes. And which of your sisters, did all three sisters kind of watch over you, or did Milt watch over you?
Betty was my one that took care of me.
And how did she take care of you?
Oh, I think I must have roomed with her, and I'm pretty sure I did. And she'd see to it that I did the things I was supposed to do, keep my room tidied up, and got my teeth brushed, and all these things that she'd had to do, and she was pretty good about seeing to it that I can't remember that she was overly strict, but she saw to it that they got done.
And did you ever room with Borgie or my mother too, with Swanee, or not?
With your mother, I did when she was older, and when Betty and Borgie were not there anymore.
Then you roomed with my mom.
I roomed with them. I roomed with her the year she was so sick with malaria, and I used to lie in bed and worry about her because she was so sick, and they kept taking care of her by herself, and they just didn't want me playing around in the room. They wanted me to leave quiet and so that she wouldn't, so she could sleep and things. And we were coming home, and we had been in Paris for a couple of days, and then we were going to go to Norway, and we got on the train. Lute was out in one of the other cars, and came up there, and I remember him standing there, and there was snow, and he said, "Snow." I said, "Snow." And he was so surprised. We'd told him about snow, but he could not remember. He couldn't even feature it, evidently. He was all excited then when we were up. We just hit Denmark, I think, and going through there, and it was starting to snow there. He was so excited about that snow coming down because we've been telling him about it for many years. And evidently, he couldn't quite imagine what snow was like.
Now, you're the big sister to Luther when it was just the two of you at the mission school. So did you kind of try to take care of him, or was he old enough to take care of himself then?
I tried to take care of him a little bit because had he was sick so much.
Luther was?
Yeah,
Oh,
he had malaria really bad,
huh.
and he would have to lie inside. He couldn't go outside and play with us, and try to fill in and read to him or something so that he wasn't just all by himself all the time. But he was really sick. He didn't even resent having to stay in.
How old was he when he had that? Do you remember about how old he was?
Oh, let's see, what would I say? Maybe like second, third grade.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Well, he was so much older than Lute, and it seemed like he got permission to go out hunting, and Lute was not allowed to do it, and he felt he was a lot younger, but he felt like he should be able to have gone hunting with Milt.
So Dagny, as you think back, when was the first time that you saw Dale? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I can. We were standing out by the entry going in. There's a gate into the place.
Into the
And
Augustana Academy, right?
yes,
Yeah.
and he was standing out there when I came, and he was with this friend of mine from Madagascar, and he started talking to me, and then he introduced Dale, and it ended up that we were going. It was a Bible study that night, uh, and he wanted to know if I would go with him to this.
With Dale?
Yeah,
So he asked you on a date, sort of,
yeah.
the first time he saw you.
Well, that was the custom for them at this Bible study. A lot of times the young people would go couples, and it was down by the river, and then just a place we'd sit down there.
So was it love at first sight then?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, how about on your part? Were you really attracted to him just from the very beginning?
No, I can't say that. I liked him, but he was really George's friend, and I went because George kept saying, "He's a nice guy. Go ahead."
Oh yeah.
And it was kind of prompting by him.
So then when did you fall in love with him then? Did it take a month or 2 months or a year or?
Oh, I would say a couple, maybe 3, 4 months.
Really? Really?
Yeah, I didn't really know him. I mean, he would come up and by my desk and talk to me, but no, I think it was more on his part. I mean, he kept on trying to get me to go with him to things. And
So then, Dagny, did Dale get down on his knees and ask you to marry him, or don't you remember that happening?
I don't remember. I think we just started talking about getting married, and well, because the year was finishing up, and
Was this your junior year or senior year?
it's the senior year.
Oh, so you
So
had to make a decision about what you were going to do
Right.
after that. Huh?
yeah,
And then he gave you that necklace?
yeah.
When did he give you that? Was that before you were married?
Yes. But,
Or when you were in high school?
yeah, it was still while we were in high school. It has a date on it, and
And was that kind of a promise necklace then, or?
I imagine kind of, I think he figured if he gave me something and I would wear it, it would mean that I accepted it.
His invitation to marriage, huh?
Yeah, I imagine so.
Huh. Was he a romantic person or not?
No, I don't really think he was.
I don't picture Dale being that way, but he didn't write poems to you or sing you songs or anything like that?
No, not Dale.
And then you got married soon after high school?
Uh, a year. Went to St. Louis for a year, and then it was after that
Oh, yeah.
he didn't. He had this hanging over his head that the army might take him,
Oh, I see.
and he had to go up to what is it, Minneapolis, Fort,
Right.
go up there and be checked out.
Mm-hmm.
And then they told him that by the end of the first year after we were going together, he went up for the checkup, but they didn't accept him. His father put in this plea for that he was needed at home. There was no other boys there to help him.
Right. They didn't take, many times they didn't take farmers, did they? Because
No,
they knew
because
that
they
they
were,
needed the
yeah,
food and, yeah.
So he was kind of disappointed with that because he kind of wanted to go and kind of get away from the farm thing. But
So then Dale would take you shopping all the time for clothes, is that correct?
not all the time. Once in a while he'd go along, and usually he'd find a place to sit down, and that's as much as I saw him.
That sounds like me.
I'd come back and tell him I had found some things and kind of give him a look at it, but he didn't much care.
No.
And
And then did
so-
you do all his shopping, or did he go out and buy his clothes for his farm clothes or his dress up clothes or whatever?
Well, I usually bought them too.
You did?
He'd tell me what he wanted, and I'd go and try and pick out what he would wear.
And did he usually like what you bought?
Yes,
Yeah.
he never complained about the clothes.
Now, when I was a kid, I used to have church clothes. Did he have like one suit or something that he?
Yes, he had suits that I would get for him, and
Like many of them, or just one or two that he would wear every Sunday for church?
that's about it. I mean, I kind of knew what kind he wanted, and then I would pick out, say, a couple pair of pants too, so that he had something more to wear, and that way he would wear until I would tell him, "You need some new clothes," and then he'd usually go along and look at them and see kind of what he thought looked okay, and then if I okayed them, he usually tried them on, and
Yeah. And afterwards, did you wish that you had stayed then instead of going shopping? And of course, you didn't know, but
yeah, I did. I felt bad that I had gone shopping and that he had said he was going to lie down for a while, and I thought, oh, maybe if I just stayed there, I would have realized that he was worse than I thought he was.
he went out on the tractor anyway, though, right? Didn't he die on the tractor?
No, he got off. Randy said that he got off of the tractor and started walking to where Randy was on the other tractor. And Randy jumped down and went towards him, but she was gone before Randy got there.
Oh my! So Randy was there then?
Yeah,
Yeah.
seems like I should have been able to do something.
Yes.
I should have. Well, this county nurse said too, she said, you should have been able to do something at that time if you had realized it was not that he was just having, had eaten some food that upset him.
Right. Right.
And
There's a lot of what ifs, of course, that we always have.
there's so many, because you just think, why didn't I? I should have been there. I should have realized that. It just seemed like he went so fast. There was no excusing the doctor for not realizing that he wasn't having upset stomach from what he had eaten or hadn't eaten. Or
So then who took over the farm? Then did Randy take that responsibility, or Don, or Pam, or
Don
Candy?
did.
Who did? Who did?
Don walked out of the office where she worked and handed the instruments that he worked with and to this friend of his that he'd been going to school with, and came home and farmed. And he was, just about finished with his schooling down at the university. And
So he just left everything and came home and
yep,
ran the farm. But then Randy helped too. Then.
yeah. So the
So what were you doing when you heard that Randy had died?
I was pretty shook up.
I mean, did you get a telephone call or did somebody come and tell you?
I must have, no, it was a phone call. And I think Candy probably got the call. And they came and told me, I think Don and Candy came.
And that was a total surprise too. You didn't know anything about him being sick
No,
or anything?
no,
And maybe no one did. Maybe
I don't think he had ever,
no idea whatsoever.
no. Uh, No, he had been working at this farm where he had quite a bit of the responsibility for taking care of all these trees.
Right.
And he just never said anything. I suppose since his father had died so quickly, I don't know if it occurred to him. I don't know. I know he came up one day and standing and talking to him outside, and he says, "Mom, I'll take care of you." It didn't last long.
Hmm.
Grew up right next to her grandmother and an aunt that spoiled her all the time, and she used to go back and forth there a lot, and she was just an outgoing person. She liked to go over there. She had her friends that we would visit, and she would do all this playing with them that they played with. And I don't know, she was a very typical child, I think.
Did Candy ever get in trouble?
No, I don't remember that. I asked her too the other day. I said, "Was I rough with you? Did I get after you for doing things?" No, she says, "I don't think so."
And did she like school or did she
She liked school.
she liked to go to school?
Yes, she did.
And was she out there taking care of the chickens and the pigs and the...
She did, but she hated picking eggs.
Oh,
Now, the other kids would do that, but she hated picking eggs.
and how come, do you think?
Because they peck at your fingers when
Oh,
you go
yes.
put your hand in there.
Yes.
And she hated that job. And then get them cleaned and into the boxes that we sold them in. And the chickens were not her favorite thing at all.
And if she had any free time, what would she do? Would she be reading or
Read.
would she be...
Reading mostly.
She did read a lot, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah?
And watch some TV, but not a big TV watcher either.
Well, there was not a lot of TV back in those days, but as she grew older, then TV came about, didn't it?
Well, there used to be enough in the evening so that they could. Oh, they liked to go to town because the store that had TV, they could stand and watch that for a while.
Did she like to do anything with her dad, especially?
Yeah, she would go out and he would sit and be fixing something, and she'd go out and talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of, she ran around. Again, she had this grandmother and grandfather next door, and they had a daughter that came home often, and she liked to run over there and visit. And she liked to go visit people. She had some girlfriends that she ran around with when it was Saturday night and they went to town or something. And she was just, I don't know, pretty typical farm kid. She didn't She never did farm. I don't know. She never did go out on the machinery or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's she was she liked, really, I think she liked being in the house more than anything. And she loved school. She had,
Tell me
Patty
that.
thought that was
Tell me
pretty
that.
neat.
Tell me that again about Candy. She had a what teacher?
She had a friendly teacher that would invite her to her house. She lived just a few miles from here, and she'd invite her to come and spend the evening or something at her house. And Candy thought that was pretty neat that she was invited to go stay with them.
Mm-hmm.
And when she got into upper grades, she liked school real well, and she did her work. I don't think I ever had to get after her to do work.
Right. Right. Okay. Tell me
Patty
that.
thought that was
Tell me
pretty
that.
neat.
Tell me that again about Candy. She had a what teacher?
She had a friendly teacher that would invite her to her house. She lived just a few miles from here, and she'd invite her to come and spend the evening or something at her house. And Candy thought that was pretty neat that she was invited to go stay with them.
Mm-hmm.
And when she got into upper grades, she liked school real well, and she did her work. I don't think I ever had to get after her to do work.
Right. Right. Okay. Now, what do you think about being the last surviving sibling in the family? What do you think about that?
It's lonesome.
Hmm.
It's you have these times and you think, I should tell that person. I should tell them about something. I should talk to them about this. And they aren't there anymore, and that's no fun.
Yeah, there are many times when I'd like to tell my mother something, and I even
Yeah.
reach for the phone, and then I remember I can't.
Yeah. Well, I know, because Swanee, towards the end there, we used to call each other back and forth and just talk about different things. And now I keep thinking, well, I should call Swanee and tell her this. And then she isn't there anymore. And, it got to be that way with different ones. With Betty, she used to be such a good person to call me. And Borgie, too. Borgie had Sunday afternoons, she'd call me. And very seldom missed. And Betty, when she was sick towards the end, she would call me, and the kids said that she'd say, "Oh, I've got to call Dagny. I've got to call her," and she would be good about calling and talking to me. And so there different things that you kind of remember from each one that you used to do together.
Well, it's an amazing life, isn't it? When you started out 91 years ago, and you then had, let's see, there were 4 older than you, and 1 that was still coming.
Yeah.
And all those years, and all the history, and all the children and grandchildren and great grandchildren, and
Well, you think now in this day and age, we were 6 of us, and that was pretty amazing to have that large a family and live the way we did. I mean, kind of, they had to move around and get these kids all ready to go along on these trips from here to there, and it had to be a big job, but Dad having to try and line up passage for us to go here and there and try and arrange it somehow or other so we'd stop in Norway. And there were some people that, some of our friends who would say, "Oh, your parents have so much money," and because we'd stop in Norway and do things like that, and so I asked Dad about it, and he said, "It isn't that." He says, "I just save at different places." He says, "I don't spend as much for the ships that we go on." He says, I take a cheaper passage and just save a few dollars here and there so that we can go off in Norway and see the families around there, and we did those things, and we were the ones who benefited because we got to see so much that other kids didn't. When we were in France, my dad would make sure that we went around and saw the different things in France. Mom wouldn't always go along, but Dad would get up and take us around to see the different things that he felt like we should see. I remember when we were in New York, he got us up early one morning and took us down to where the newspapers were coming out. And he says, "You should remember this." He says, "That's the way the newspapers are set up. At early in the morning they come down, and the newsboys come down and pick them up." And he got us up out of bed and took us down to see what the newspapers coming out from the big